technical difficulties, everybody. We are a few minutes late getting started, so I will be quick here with our housekeeping so we can go ahead and get this training going. I'm super excited about it. Welcome. If this is your first session here, I'll provide some brief details. This is our Fall 2024 series, which is designed specifically with support coordinators and any kind of case or care manager in mind. Our topics were chosen by a group of support coordinators and a self-advocate. That being said, all are welcome. So if you know anyone that's interested in these topics we'll be presenting on over the next few weeks, you're welcome to share the link with them. Our schedule has changed already. If you've noticed from our tentative schedule, we shared the beginning of the fall. And it may change a little bit more over the next few weeks as we finalize presenters and topics. So if you have an ECHO account already, which if you're here on this link, you should, you will see those changes as they happen, but we'll also keep you updated by email. These sessions are recorded for quality and educational purposes, and we also record them so that people who weren't able to attend can go back and watch them. So by participating in this session, you are consenting to being recorded. You are welcome to leave at any time. I will only be a little bit offended if you choose to leave. We've been in the Zoom world for a while, but if you have any questions about the logistics of Zoom, so how to raise your hand if you have a question or if you need to rename your profile, you can send a message to me. I have the ECHO background. I can answer any questions if you have any today during today's session. It's possible that we'll have conversations today about examples from your real life scenarios, whether that's a friend or a family member. So just remember to protect individual privacy. If you're sharing information about another person, avoid using their real first or last name or initials, anything that might be identifying. And of course, don't provide any family member information, contact information, things like that in the chat. So we'd like to de-identify examples and situations if we can. Reach out to me if you have any questions about something you'd like to share, but you're not quite sure. Typically, our ECHO sessions include a case presentation and a lot of interaction. These sessions are definitely most successful when everybody participates. So we encourage you to join in on conversations. If you do have a case scenario you'd like to bring to one of these sessions for discussion, we would love that. You are welcome to reach out to me. I have my email on this slide coming up here. So if you have a mental health related case scenario that you'd like to bring to a group for conversation, it's a great opportunity to get feedback from other perspectives and people in the field. You're welcome to send me an email at rachel.byers@usu.edu. I will also drop that in the chat. For November, one of our topics will be mental health crisis prevention and your role as a support coordinator or case manager. So if you have any scenarios that have recently happened and you'd like someone's perspective on, or maybe things that are going on right now that you think would be helpful to have input from the community on, I'd love to see those. We do offer CEUs through the Utah Social Work Association for those who attend the entire session. We have a survey link, which is in the chat, and I'll make sure that we add that a few times so you have that link. If you do want CEUs or a certificate of attendance, you'll need to fill out the survey and I will get those to you. If you're here, you have an ECHO account, hopefully, but that's where we will also maintain some of the content from these sessions. So any handouts or materials we'd like to share, you can access those there. If you have any questions about the ECHO platform or the series in general, please feel free to reach out to me at that email I mentioned. We do have a social media page if you'd like to learn more about this ECHO, or we have several other ECHO series going on that you may be interested in. I'd encourage you to follow that QR code or find our handles here on Facebook and Instagram to learn more about what's going on. So our next session will be in November. We'll have more information up on the ECHO platform within the next few days about, it will be on mental health crisis prevention. We are really lucky today to have someone from the Trevor Project to provide us with some training regarding working with LGBTQIA plus youth, how we can help prevent mental health crises and suicide among that population. I will give a little bit of a bio and then I'll let Keegan finish introducing themselves and we'll get the training rolling. So Keegan Miller is the Director of Public Training for the Trevor Project, the leading suicide prevention and crisis intervention organization for LGBTQ plus young people. Keegan oversees design and facilitation of public trainings to advance Trevor's life-saving suicide prevention work and teach audiences to be strong allies for LGBTQ plus youth. Prior to this work, Keegan was an advocacy manager at the Trevor Project, and they served as an intervention specialist for Cincinnati Public Schools. Keegan received a Master of Arts in Education in Curriculum and Instruction from the University of Cincinnati, as well as a Master of Education in Human Development and Education Policy from the George Washington University. I am really looking forward to today's training. I'm glad that you've all been able to join, and I will stop sharing my screen and turn it over to Keegan.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. It is such a delight to be with you today. Let me just share my screen real fast. Can we all see that okay? Good. Excellent. Excellent. All right. So, as said, my name is Keegan. I use they, them pronouns. I am the Director of Public Training here at Trevor, and I'm excited to do a little ally training with you today. So what today will look like, we'll do a little welcome. We'll talk about Trevor Project, our services, what we do, why we do it. And then we'll talk through some LGBTQ 101, some language considerations, a little bit of intersectionality and bias conversation, and then actionable allyship will be kind of the theme throughout the entire session, really diving into what are those little things and those big things that we can do to support LGBTQ young people. And then we'll have time at the end for some resources and question and answer. Now, just because question and answers at the end doesn't mean you have to hold your questions. By all means, ask them as you have them. You can use the chat function or the little raise hand feature. Whatever works best for you is perfectly fine by me. Some things to keep in mind. This is just the beginning. I always like to say what's said here should stay here, but what's learned here should leave here. So I hope you'll take something from today's session back into your day-to-day life and work. I also want to recognize that people have different levels of experience and knowledge about today's topics. So for some people, this is a refresher course, and for others, this is brand new material. And so wherever you are on your allyship journey, you are certainly welcome here. And then finally, I hope you keep an open mind, be non-judgmental about the material, about yourselves, about each other as we go through this session today. So the Trevor Project is the leading suicide prevention and crisis intervention organization for LGBTQ young people. Our mission is to end LGBTQ youth suicide, but our true goal is to help every LGBTQ young person see a bright future for themselves. Now, we do that work in two ways. First, and what we're typically more known for is our intervention work. So we operate 24/7 crisis lifeline, chat, and text. And so basically folks can reach out to us when they're experiencing anything from, suicidal ideation all the way down to something as simple as, I just had a rough day and need someone to talk to. Doesn't matter, we're there for them. We do focus our services on folks who are 24 and under, and who are LGBTQ. That being said, if anyone reaches out to us, we will certainly serve them. We just might direct them to other resources that might be more appropriate for the future. In addition to the ways on the screen that you see there that you can get a hold of us, we also operate part of the 988 system. So 988 is the national lifeline number. Now, much like you would call 911 for physical health emergencies, you can call 988 for mental health emergencies. And you'll get connected in with your local service center. But when you call, you're offered, if you want specialized services, there are a couple of specialized services available. Spanish-speaking language, services for veterans, and then services for LGBTQ folks. And we are one of several service providers that provide that specialized service for LGBTQ folks. And then in addition to our intervention work, we do a lot of prevention work. Our goal in prevention is really to work ourselves out of a job, right? To prevent crisis from happening to begin with. And so the first part of our prevention work is Trevor Space, which is a safe space social networking site for LGBTQ youth. Basically, it's a place where our young people can get online, talk with one another. They can talk about their identities, or they can talk about latest TikTok trend. It doesn't matter. It's really about building community and connection, which we know is one of the strongest protective factors for LGBTQ youth. Now, a couple of important things to know about Trevor Space. There are some parts of Trevor Space that are age segregated. So, for example, direct messaging. You can only direct message folks within your own age bracket. So if you're under 18, only with other under 18-year-olds, or if you're 18 to 24, only with folks in that age range. So again, keeping some safety there. We also have 24/7 moderation. So our moderators are amazing. They're watching out for things like inappropriate content, or if someone's in crisis, getting them connected to our crisis services as quickly as possible. So again, really great resource to get connected in with for our LGBTQ youth. Then we have our research team, which puts out regular evaluations on LGBTQ youth mental health and well-being. Most notably, our national survey that's come out annually the last 6 years. A lot of the statistics I talk about today come from that national survey. Then we have our advocacy team, which works at local, state, and federal levels to advocate for LGBTQ young people in all aspects of legislation. And a lot of times it looks like pushing back against anti-LGBTQ laws right now. So a lot of that happening. Anti-trans medical care and banning of books and all sorts of other things that are happening. But there's some good stuff happening too, things like banning conversion therapy or getting non-discrimination policies in places. So there's some positive work happening. It just sometimes gets overshadowed. And then finally, we have our education team, which I might be just a little teensy bit biased, but it's my favorite, where we seek to educate primarily youth serving adults, making sure that folks have all the tools in their back pockets to provide safe and affirming environments, to respond to crisis, all those types of things. So, why do we focus on suicidality amongst LGBTQ young people? To answer that question, I first need to take a step back and look at suicide as a whole in this country. So, we know suicide is preventable, but it continues to be a growing health problem. Over the last couple of decades, the suicide rate has increased by about 37%. It's currently the ninth leading cause of death for folks ages 10 to 64. So, a really big issue overall. But if I narrow that down a little bit and I just look at my young people, we find that it's the second leading cause of death for folks 10 to 14 and the third leading cause of death for folks 15 to 24. So an even bigger issue for my young people. Now, in case you're wondering, the first leading cause of death is accidental death or unintentional injury, depending on what state you are in, as to how they label that. If you think about it, we do a lot to prevent that first leading cause, right? We have seatbelt laws, we have lifeguards in places, we have campaigns to get kids to wear their helmets when they ride their bike, right? Like we do a lot to prevent that first leading cause. And we can be doing just as much to prevent suicide. But again, that's everyone in that age bracket. If I narrow it down even further and I just look at LGBTQ youth, we find that they are 4 times more likely than their peers to seriously consider attempting suicide. In fact, in our most recent survey, 39% of LGBTQ youth said that they'd seriously considered attempting suicide in the past year. So we can see there again, an even bigger issue for LGBTQ young people. Now, if I take that percent and I take a conservative estimate of how many LGBTQ youth there are in this country, we find that more than 1.8 million LGBTQ youth seriously consider suicide each and every year. That's why these conversations around LGBTQ young people and supporting them and their mental health is so important. Now, I say all of this, and I don't want us to think that LGBTQ young people are inherently prone to suicide risk because of who they are. It's not about their identity. Rather, they're placed at higher risk because of the mistreatment and stigmatization that they face in society. For example, 60% of our young people reported experiencing discrimination based on sexual orientation or gender identity. As you might imagine, that level of discrimination, not too good for one's mental health and well-being. And then when our young people needed help, were they able to get it? And there, the answer is, again, largely no. So 84% of our young people said they wanted help from a mental health professional, but 50% of those were unable to receive that help in the past year. Now, there's a lot of reasons why they couldn't get that help. Here are the top 10, but I'll kind of break it down into the three main categories. So the first category is around accessibility. So things like, can I afford it? How high is my deductible? Do I have health insurance that covers mental health? Do I have transportation? Do I have to travel a far distance? You know, any of those accessibility issues is one of the number one reasons. Now, that's not unique to LGBTQ youth, of course, but we do see disproportionate rates of LGBTQ young people facing those access issues. The second category is more around mental health stigma. So things like being afraid to talk about your mental health, being afraid you wouldn't be taken seriously, excuse me, um, being judged, any of those like stigmatization pieces. And then the third area is around LGBTQ identities themselves. Things like, is my therapist going to out me to my parents? Or is my therapist even going to understand my identity as an LGBTQ young person? By the way, that percentage, that 22%, significantly increases when we look at LGBTQ young people who hold multiple marginalized identities. So LGBTQ young people of color, LGBTQ young people with disabilities, LGBTQ young people from a low socioeconomic status. Like any of those, we're going to see an increase in that, because then the question is like, does my therapist understand me as an LGBTQ person, but also as a person that holds this other identity, and where those things intersect? And so it's really important that we recognize that competent care has to cover not just our LGBTQ identities, but also our other identities that we hold. Now I say all this and it's like, whew, it's pretty stark statistics. And so like take a deep breath, because it's not all bad. All right. We also want to look at protective factors. And one of the protective factors that we know is that when LGBTQ young people report feeling accepted by adults in their life, it lowers their odds of attempting suicide by up to 40%. And oftentimes it only takes one supportive adult to really make that big of a difference. So you can be that one supportive adult in an LGBTQ young person's life, which is pretty cool. But like, imagine if we didn't just have one supportive adult in the young person's life, but instead we had a community of affirming adults around these young people. And imagine the impact that that could have. And that's what we really want to create, is that community, that support system around our LGBTQ young people. So let's talk about that. How do we make that happen? So let's talk about allyship. So I'd love for you to use the chat if you can, and tell me what you think of, words or phrases that you think of when you think of the word allyship. What comes to mind when you hear someone say, "Oh, someone's an ally," or allyship's important? What types of things? Empathy, absolutely, for sure. What else? Stand with you. Yeah. Support, absolutely. Anything else? No judgment. Hmm. These are all really good. Action. Yeah, it's like you knew what was coming. Action is the most important thing. Exactly. Allyship is supporting a community that's not your own. but it has to be active. It requires doing the work. That includes educating yourself, which you're doing right now. Well done. But it can be anything, right? It can be actively listening to someone tell their story. It can be standing up when we hear something um, that is discriminatory and speaking out against that. It could be paying attention to who we're voting for and making sure that we're voting for people who support LGBTQ rights. Um, it could be celebrating LGBTQ identities, right? There's a ton of different ways to be an active ally, but the key is it requires doing the work. And so the litmus test that we kind of put out there for you to consider is, would the community you ally yourself with consider you to be an ally? And really think about that. And if the answer is yes, great, keep doing whatever it is you're doing. But if the answer is maybe, maybe not, I'm not sure, then I encourage you today to think about what's one thing you can do going forward that's showing that you are an active ally in the community. All right, due to time constraints, I'm going to skip that slide actually. So let's talk about common language. One of the best things that we can do when we're trying to be an ally to a community is to understand the language that's used within that community. So I want to talk through some common terms and a little bit about their history and that type of thing today. So we're going to do some kind of a game show style, if you will. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop up a term on the screen. I'm going to read it out loud. And if you think you know what that word is that I'm defining, go ahead and put that in the chat. Even if you're like, oh, I think it's this thing, and you have to put 3 question marks behind it, that's okay. Take your best guess. There's no wrong answers here, just learning. All right, so the first one, a collection of physical characteristics and personal mannerisms that society associates with a particular sex. What do we think that is? Good. Yeah, gender. Exactly. You got it. Um, so gender is a societal construct. We develop our understanding of gender collectively. And depending on what era you grew up in, what culture you grew up in, what your mom and dad said about it, what your, church said about it, doesn't, all these things collectively create our understanding of gender. And gender shifts and changes over time. It's not always, it's not stagnant. It moves around a bit. And to give a couple of examples, let's talk about high heels for a minute, right? Consider that in our current society, high heels are considered a feminine trait, right? Doesn't matter who's wearing them, they're considered to be more feminine. Has that always been the case? Mm-mm. I can look back as recent as like disco era. Heels were for everyone, big old platform heels, right? But I can go back to like Roman Empire, Napoleon, that era, and recognize that military generals were wearing heels. They were also wearing tights and wigs and makeup and all sorts of other stuff as well that we now consider to be more feminine. But that shifted, that changed over time of what we consider masculine versus feminine. The color pink is another really great example of this. So in the early 1800s, pink was considered to be more masculine and blue was more feminine. Well, there's a lot of reasons why that is, but my favorite is that pink pigment was really expensive. So if you painted your walls pink, it was a sign of wealth. And if you held wealth in the early 1800s, you were probably a man, probably a white land-owning man, but man nonetheless. So pink was associated with wealth, which was associated with masculinity. Now, that changed in the early 1900s, around the same time that mass media marketing started happening, which was really convenient because, at that point they said, oh, you had a little baby girl? Congratulations. You should dress her in pink. Oh, you had a little baby boy? Congratulations. You should dress him in blue. Oh, you had one and then the other? Well, now you need to buy all new things. What a great marketing ploy, right? Capitalism influences our understanding of gender. Now, I say that, and I don't want you to think that that's a bad thing. I think it's just a data point. It just kind of is. It could be a good thing if used correctly. Because if we know that gender shifts and changes over time, and we do, we know that then it could shift and change again. And perhaps it could shift and change to be more inclusive, more expansive. And we can use all these tools to get there. All right, enough about gender. Let's move to the next one. See if you know what this one is. Someone's innermost concept of self as masculine, feminine, a blend of both, another gender or set of genders. What do we think that is? Good, good, good. Gender identity, exactly. So, um, gender is out here floating around like a social construct. And then we individually look at that and take a piece of it and say, that's my gender identity. That's who I am. Everyone has a gender identity. Some people just don't have to think about theirs as hard as others. That's all. I actually do wish that everyone would think about their gender a little bit more. Um, like if I could give everyone a homework writing assignment, I'd be like, journal for 5 minutes on the following questions. Like, number one, what is my gender identity? Number two, how do I know that's my gender identity? Number three, when did I first know that was my gender identity? Number four, what parts of my gender identity am I comfortable with? And number five, what parts of my gender identity am I uncomfortable with? I think if we all answered those questions for ourselves, it would help in two different ways. Number one, we would know ourselves a little bit more. And when we know our own identity, it helps reduce fear because then the unknown of other people's identity doesn't affect us because we know who we are. So that's really helpful. The second piece is it can probably help us develop a little bit of empathy for trans folks and what questions they're asked and ask themselves when it comes to identity. And a little bit of empathy goes a long, long way. All right, how about this next one? The ways in which a person presents himself to the world through hairstyles, clothing, toys, preferences, mannerisms, etc. Yeah, gender expression, exactly. So we had gender floating around out here. We took and claimed our own identity, and then we put that back out into the world. And that putting it back out into the world, that's our gender expression. Now, more people do tend to think about their gender expression than their gender identity. For example, when you woke up this morning and you put on some clothes, part of your decision making involved gender expression, whether you realize it or not. But there's a lot of choices that we make in our day. How do you walk down the street? Do you swish a lot or do you walk stiffly? That's gender expression. What activities do you choose to participate in? What types of hobbies do you have? All of these things involve gender expression to some extent. And so, conscious or unconscious, you do probably think about your gender expression a little bit more. Now, there are lots of reasons why someone's gender expression might not align with their gender identity. And I want to highlight two really important ones. The first one is one that I think a lot of people can understand, and that is safety. Sometimes it is downright unsafe to express your gender in the way that you want to in the world. Now, that's true for a lot of people in a lot of different circumstances. It's particularly true for trans women of color who face disproportionate rates of harassment and assault, violence, and homicide in this country. But again, a lot of people, I think, curb their gender expression in order to maintain safety. Another really important reason someone's identity and expression might not align is economic reasons. And I'll use myself as an example of this. So when I came out as trans, I was in undergrad. I was student teaching at the time, and I was, working all day for free as student teachers do, and then going to school in the evening, right? Not a lot of disposable income happening there. So I couldn't afford to go buy a whole new wardrobe. That just wasn't an option. So I had to, over time, build up the pieces in my closet to fit the expression that I wanted to have out in the world. Right? So safety, economic reasons, both reasons why someone's expression might not align with their identity. But frankly, no one owes anyone any particular gender expression. We should all feel free to express our gender in whatever way makes us most comfortable in the world. All right, how about this one? Someone whose gender identity differs from the gender they were assigned at birth. Yeah, good. Transgender, exactly. Or trans for short. A couple of important things to know about this word. One, transgender is a noun. It is a noun. Or sorry, an adjective, not a noun. I'm getting myself all the twist here. It is an adjective, not a noun, which means we don't use it as a noun like a transgender or transgenders with an S. Instead, we're using it to describe something. So a transgender person, a trans athlete, the trans community, transgender man, whatever the case might be. But it's always going to describe that noun. We're also not going to add like ed on the end because it's not a verb, so it's not transgendered. That's not a word. Don't do that. Always describing. Now let's talk about where the word trans comes from. So if we look at that prefix trans, and we think back to like science modality here, uh, trans means like the opposite side of or across from, right? And so originally in its terminology, trans meant your gender was across from what it was assigned at birth. So if you're a male, you're now female. If you're a female, you're now male. Now, that still sometimes is accurate, but it's a little bit of a misnomer because now if we look at other identities like gender fluid identities and genderqueer or non-binary identities, it's not quite across. It's just different than. But that's where the original term came from. This is going to be more important for the next word, which is a term for people whose gender identity matches the sex or gender they were assigned at birth. Yeah, exactly. Cisgender. Good. Yeah, again, this is an adjective, so it's going to be a cisgender person. Um, cis, CIS, meaning same side as. So your gender is the same as it was assigned at birth. We basically needed a term that was opposite of transgender. So that way we weren't othering or making it non-normative to be trans. And so we just looked at the opposite of the word trans, which is cis, and voila, we have the word cisgender. How about a term used to describe one's gender identity as not fitting into a binary understanding of gender? Yeah, love when the term is in the definition, right? Non-binary works and also accept genderqueer. What's the difference? Depends on who you ask. These two words are somewhat interchangeable. I say somewhat because we always want to mirror the language that someone uses for themselves. So if someone calls themselves non-binary, we wouldn't call them genderqueer, we call them non-binary. We use the word they use for themselves. That being said, some of us, like myself included, use these terms interchangeably because they mean very similar things. Basically, not a man, not a woman. Maybe it's somewhere in between, it's somewhere outside of that concept altogether, but not those two things. How about an umbrella term used to describe someone born with internal and/or external sexual anatomy that doesn't fit the typical expectations of that male-female binary, also known as differences of sex development? Intersex, indeed. So few important things about intersex folks. One, it's a lot more common to be intersex than people realize. Oftentimes when people think of intersex folks, they think about people who were born with ambiguous genitalia. That is one of many, many ways of being intersex. There are so many different chromosomal, hormonal, internal versus external reproductive system differences that make up the intersex population. And it's just as common to be intersex as it is to be a naturally born redhead. Think about that for a minute. If you know a naturally born redhead, you probably also know an intersex person. Just may not know that you know. Some people who are intersex identify as LGBTQ, some don't. That's okay. Again, we're going to mirror the language a person uses for themselves in that case. Additionally, though, it's important to recognize that there are a lot of things that the intersex community faces that the trans community also faces, and vice versa. So when we're talking about LGBTQ issues, we have to consider the fact that it's also impacting intersex folks as well. All right, slide changed color because we're changing direction of topics. That's your hint. So how about a term for that is commonly defined as patterns of emotional, romantic, and or sexual attraction to another person or people? Good. Sexual orientation. I'd also have accepted sexuality if you would have said that, but yeah, sexual orientation is what we're looking for here. So important piece about this. Notice it's emotional, romantic, and or sexual attraction. So often the LGBTQ community gets hypersexualized and it all becomes about who's sleeping with who, which, while important, is not the only aspect of relationships. And so we need to make sure that we're being clear that there's other stories about those relationships, emotional and romantic. How about someone who is a man whose attractions are to some other men? Sometimes we use this for the entire community as well. Good. Gay, exactly. Now, sometimes we use it and we say the gay community. And while it's not technically wrong, it isn't as inclusive as it could be. So oftentimes when we're talking about the whole community, we'll say LGBTQ or LGBTQ plus, LGBTQIA, any of those things. And if you're wondering which one of those is right, the answer is yes, any of them. Start with LGBTQ. If you want to add other things to make it more inclusive, that's great. How about someone who identifies as a woman whose attractions are to some other women? Yeah, lesbian, exactly. Okay, now on this slide, I said whose attractions are to some other women. And on the last slide, I said attractions are to some other men. Why would we say that? Well, because it's not all. It's like the common locker room trope where there's the guy and he's like, well, I don't want the gay guy in the locker room with me. He might stare at me. And I'm thinking, honey, you aren't that cute. He's not staring at you, right? Um, just because we're attracted to a certain gender doesn't mean that we're attracted to everyone of that gender. Much like straight men aren't attracted to all women, and straight women aren't attracted to all men. Same goes for LGBTQ identities as well. How about an individual who's attracted to members of more than one gender? Yep, bisexual. I'd also take pansexual. Either one works. What's the difference between these two? Well, again, depends on who you ask. And again, we're going to mirror language that people use for themselves. But historically, bisexual has been kind of uh, pigeonholed as being a binary. So you're attracted to both men and women, which is not exactly where the term came from initially, but okay, sure. But then, along came trans and non-binary folks and we're like, hi, we exist. think we're attractive on occasion. So where do we fit into this sexual orientation business? Right? And so that's where we came up with the term pansexual. Now, if you think about pan like panorama across the board, right? Now, pansexual doesn't mean that a person is attracted to everyone. It just simply means that gender and sex don't make a difference. It's about the person there, and it's not about their gender or their sex. And whether or not those things match doesn't matter. The possibility for attraction is there. Notice possibility, not guarantee. Um, Now, in the late 80s, early 90s, part of the bisexual community, there's this lovely document called the Bisexual Manifesto. Good reading if you have a chance. They basically said, hey, we weren't trying to exclude people with with this term. What if we think about how we define bisexual a little differently? So bi means two, right? Two parts. But what if we define those two parts as I'm attracted to people of my gender, whatever that is, and I'm attracted to people of other genders, whatever those are. So other is a little bit more wide open rather than just saying male and female, we're saying mine and other. So again, people might use these terms in different ways depending on the situation. That's why mirroring language is this, key to all this. But again, all this is more than one gender of experience attraction for that. How about someone who experiences little or no sexual attraction? Asexual or ace, exactly. Now notice this is little or no. That doesn't mean, it's not a straight up no, and it's not straight up little. It depends on the person. And there are different terms for different types of asexuality as well. We don't have time to go into those today. But if you're interested, I highly encourage you to educate yourself a little further on this. Now notice, sexual attraction is not the same thing as sexual arousal. Those are two different things. So a person might not experience sexual attraction, but might experience sexual arousal, or they might not. Depends on the person. Also, being asexual is not um, a requirement of celibacy, right? Um, there's a lot of reasons in this world that people have sex, and sexual attraction is just one of them. So again, those two things don't necessarily equal each other. They might not. It depends on the person. How about someone who's in the process of discovering or exploring their sexual orientation or gender identity? Oh, oh, there you go. I thought I had stumped you, Trisha, but you got it. Questioning indeed. Okay, so this is one option for Q. Um, we just want to leave space for people to explore their identity and figure themselves out, whether that takes a day or a lifetime. We're here for that. We just want to, welcome them and support them in whatever way best works for them. All right, and then finally, an umbrella term used to describe someone who is a sexual or gender minority. This word has historically been used as a slur, but has been increasingly reclaimed. Yeah, good, exactly. Queer. So again, this is a word where intention and tonality make a difference, right? So if you intend to use it in an appropriate way and you use a tone that is appropriate, it is perfectly fine to use this word. If you're just saying, oh, the queer community. Or maybe someone identifies as queer, that's their individual identity. Oh, they're queer. That's fine. Hollering at someone as you drive by them on the road, out your window, not an okay moment, right? So just be mindful of how you're using it and use it in an appropriate way. Now, some people are going to be uncomfortable with this word, and if that's the case, we just won't use it around them. Again, mirroring language, always important. All right, so that's it on identity terms. Now I'm going to shift to a little bit of other language considerations that we should make. But I just want to note that there are a ton of other terms out in the world around LGBTQ identities. Most LGBTQ websites, including ours, has a glossary on it. So if you want to learn more, check those out. A really fun rabbit hole to go down if you're interested is like Google pride flags, and there's pride flags for just about every identity that exists. And so see if you can match the pride flag with the identity. And if you can, great, well done. And if you come across an identity that you don't know, look it up and learn a little bit more. Remember, educating yourself is an act of allyship. Another thing we can do as allies, especially to the trans and non-binary community, is use pronouns correctly. So pronouns, one of the simplest things we can do. And why this matters. So when we talk to trans and non-binary young people, we said, what are your pronouns? What pronouns do you use? 75% of them use binary pronouns. He, him, his, she, her, hers. But 25% use pronouns beyond the binary. So either a singular they, them, theirs, combination of pronouns, or neopronouns. We're going to talk about all those in just a second. So 25% of our trans and non-binary young people are using pronouns that our society hasn't quite caught up to using yet. So it's important that we learn and we figure out how to use this correctly for that 25% of our trans and non-binary young people. Because when trans and non-binary youth said their pronouns were respected most or all of the time, their suicide attempt rate was half of the rate of those whose pronouns weren't respected. Half. Pronoun use is suicide prevention. Plain and simple. So let's make sure we're doing it right. So here's a little handy chart to just show you how these pronouns work and how they align. All pronouns have subjective, objective, possessive, and reflexive versions. You don't need to know which one's which in order to use them correctly. It just really is helpful in making a chart, honestly. So we know how to use she, her, hers, herself, he, him, his, himself. We do this all the time. Pretty simple. If someone asks you to use those pronouns for them, we do. We also use a singular they, them, theirs pronoun for individuals. We do it a lot, but we don't realize that we did it. All right. So imagine you're walking down the street and out pops a wallet onto the ground. And you're like, hey, someone dropped their wallet. They're going to miss that. I hope they come back and get it. Right? Now, none of us believe that wallet belongs to more than one person. Right? We know it belongs to one person whose gender we don't know. So we revert to a singular they, them, theirs. Now we use they, them, theirs in the same way that we would do it if we were using it in a plural. So it's still they are speaking, not they is speaking, right? But we just use context to tell us, oh, we're talking about one person. So if it helps you to think about it in this way, like, if you meet a person who uses they, them pronouns like myself, just think about it like, oh, I don't know that person's gender, and therefore I will use they. So it's an easy brain trick to use. We also have neopronouns, neo meaning new. Neopronouns are our community's response to a missing piece of language. So in the English language, we do not have a single gender neutral pronoun that is a personal pronoun. We have a single gender neutral pronoun, it. We don't typically use it for people. There are some exceptions to that, but generally we don't do that. And so we're like, oh, we don't have one. So let's create some. Because we as humans create language all the time, right? Googling wasn't a word 20 years ago, and now it is. So why not create some new pronouns? So there have been a ton of different pronouns created that are single gender neutral pronouns. But one of the more common sets that we hear is Z here, here's, or Z, zers, zers. The way that I use that, Z is speaking, I listen to here, the backpack is here's, or Z is speaking, I listen to zir, the backpack is zers. If you hear neopronouns for the first time, you probably aren't going to know how to use them correctly. And that's okay. You can learn. And learning and engaging in that learning and practicing is an act of allyship. So I would suggest if you hear a set of neopronouns that you're not familiar with and you want to be respectful, you can say to that person, hey, thanks for sharing that with me. You know, I'm not exactly sure how to use your pronouns correctly in sentences. Could you give me a few example sentences so I can practice and get it right? And then that person is going to give you a couple of example sentences. I suggest writing them down. And then you go practice. And eventually, with practice, you will get them right. Most people aren't going to get offended by that question if you ask it in a well-meaning way and you're asking it in order to work on getting it right. They're just going to be excited that you want to get it right, honestly. So ask the question, and then learn, and then practice. All of that is an act of allyship. People are going to choose what pronouns work best for them. A person's pronouns don't necessarily need to align with any particular identity or expression. People might use more than one set of pronouns. So someone might say, oh, I use they, he pronouns. If that's the case, you can use they or he for that person and you will be correct. You can even switch them out at your leisure. It's fine. Um, so yeah, you can use whatever they say, you can use any of them and you're not going to be wrong. Now, some people don't use any pronouns at all. Now, as English speakers, we don't like how that sounds because it's just using their name over and over and over again. It is grammatically correct, and again, it's going to take practice. And then if you mess up, because things happen, we mess up, we're human, not expecting anyone to be perfect, just apologize and move on. And what I mean by that is there's a difference in a quick apology and fixing the problem versus making the problem about you. So what we're not going to do is be like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I keep messing up your pronouns. It's just so hard and I'm trying really hard to get it right. That's not what we're going to do. Instead, what we want to do is say something like, hey, you know what? I'm sorry. Earlier, I messed up your pronouns. I know that you use he, him pronouns, and I'm going to do that better going forward. Right? We identify the problem, we correct it, and we say how we're going to fix it going forward. And then it's our job to fix it. You can also fix mistakes right after they happen if you notice. So if I was talking and I said, oh, yeah, Sam told me the other day that she went to the store to buy some bananas. He went to the store to buy some bananas, right? I got towards the end of the sentence, realized I messed up, went back, corrected myself, and moved on. I don't need to say anything else. I already fixed it. Everyone heard me. Everyone knows I messed up. Everyone knows I fixed it. We can move on. And then the goal is, of course, not to make that mistake again. Um, if someone's pronouns are difficult for you, maybe they just changed them and you've known them for forever and you're trying to wrap your head around it. That's okay. It happens. I have a really quick trick for that. Basically, what's happening when you're getting someone's pronouns wrong is that there's a part of your brain that is firing off little commands and going down those neural pathways that's going down the wrong pronoun path. And that because we've known that pronoun for so long, that's the path that it keeps going down. And so we need to build new neural pathways that are the correct pronoun. The problem is that building new neural pathways takes time and practice and energy. So what I suggest doing is setting an alarm on your phone to go off once a day at a time convenient to you. And when it goes off, I want you to speak out loud 3 positive affirmations about that person using their correct pronoun. Now, why do I have you do that? Well, by speaking it aloud 3 times every day, you're building that new neural pathway, right? 3 times a day, we're getting it right. That new neural pathway is being built. But it's kind of like a dirt road right now. So we need to strengthen it. We need to pave that road, right? By associating it with positive affirmations, we send our brains a little boost of serotonin, which is like taking a paver right down that neural pathway. We're more likely to return back to that because it made our brains feel good. Last thing with that is when we say nice things about people when they're not around, we tend to be nicer to them when they are around. And every trans person that I know could use a little bit more niceness in their life, I promise you. So while you're working on getting it right, you'll be a little nicer. It's a win-win all together. So 3 positive affirmations using the correct pronouns each day, every day, until you get it right every single time. Once you get it right every single time, turn off the alarm, move on with life. Again, practicing is an act of allyship. Now, sometimes people will say, well, how do I know someone's pronouns? Right? I make these assumptions based on what people look like, and sometimes that's wrong. So how do I know? There's several ways that you can know. One, you can introduce yourself with your pronouns. And you can just walk up to someone that you're meeting for the first time. You can say, hi, I'm Keegan. I use they, them pronouns, right? And then they're going to respond. And they're either going to say their pronouns or they're not. If they say their pronouns, I'm going to pay attention and make sure that I use their correct pronouns. And if they don't say their pronouns, that's usually a signal to me that whatever assumption I am making about that person is probably okay, because they're not giving me the preemptive correction, right? Now, that being said, if I do get it wrong and someone corrects me, I thank them for that correction and I work on doing it right this time. A simple, oh, thanks, didn't know. I'll do that, but I'll do that next time. And then we move on, right? Another way to know people's pronouns, and I see a few people in this Zoom have it, is the more often we make pronouns part of our culture and community, the more likely it is that people are just going to have them shared somewhere, like on your Zoom screen, for example. So if you scroll over your beautiful face or name and you see those little 3-dot button up in the corner, you can click on that little 3-dot button, and there's lots of options that pop up. One of those options is to rename yourself. And you can rename yourself and put your pronouns behind your name. And by doing that, you're signaling that first, you know what pronouns are, but second, that it's now safer for a trans person to put their pronouns behind their name. And if they put their pronouns behind their name, then you're going to know what their pronouns are. So it's a win-win all around, right? The more we normalize pronoun use, the easier it is for trans and non-binary folks. Though I will point out that pronoun use is like on email signatures and things like that is actually really helpful for more than just trans people. It's actually a gender equity issue. My colleague, who actually is right next door today, Casey, she's a lawyer, she's a cisgender woman, and people get her pronouns wrong all the time because, or they like ma'am or sir her or mister her, because they see the name Casey, they know she's a lawyer, so gender neutral name and lawyer, oh, must be male, right? Her pronouns are in her email signature. There's no reason to get it wrong, and yet they do all the time. So gender equity issue. Does it disproportionately impact trans people? Yes, but pronouns being put places helps everyone. All right. A couple of other language considerations. Let's talk about gender neutral language. So in our vernacular, we use a lot of gendered words like ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. This one's controversial, but I'm going to say it. Hey guys. These are not gender neutral terms, and therefore they exclude people. That last one excludes more than half the population, but nonetheless. So if we can think of gender neutral ways to address groups, we can be more inclusive. So there are fun ways of doing this. There are more formal ways of doing this. This slide was shared with me by a first grade teacher. So mileage may vary for peepadoodles. But if you were a first grade teacher, right? Imagine like, okay, peepadoodles, let's line up at the door. It's cute. It's adorable. But what works for you? Is it team, friends, folks, esteemed guests, colleagues, what word is going to work for you? Think about where you use gendered language in your day-to-day language, and then figure out what works to replace it. Your replacement does not need to be the same as mine. Just anything that's gender neutral is going to be helpful. I use friends a lot. I like friends. I get on a call like this and I'm like, hello, friends, how are we doing today? Right? It's nice, it's helpful, it's joyful, it's, building a safe space. That's what works for me in my context. What works for you might be different, and that's okay. But the more we can use gender neutral terms, the more inclusive we'll be. The other piece of language to be considerate of is names. So oftentimes when trans folks come out, one of the first things that happens is they change their name. And that just might be changing it the way that they go by it. Not necessarily changing their legal name, because changing your legal name is hard. It's a challenge. There are a ton of pieces of red tape to cross and court documents to file and medical records to have, like, all sorts of stuff. And then until you change things like your ID and your social security card, you can't change your health insurance or your transcripts or your professional licenses, bills, loans, banks, housing, all that stuff has your former name on it. And so that can be really triggering to trans and non-binary people to see their old name over and over again. So there's a couple of reminders, like, one, if you don't need to know someone's legal name, then you don't need to know it. So what are some legitimate reasons you would need someone's legal name? Maybe you're filing health insurance or filing for some sort of benefits, or you're signing some sort of legal document. Those things you would need someone's legal name. Tell the person why you need their legal name and what you're going to use it for. That helps reduce anxiety. And then make sure you're calling that person by the name that they like to go by. Now, if you have someone filling out like paperwork and you need to ask their legal name, but you still want to know their name, just say that. Say legal name with a blank and chosen name with a blank. We have moved away from using the word preferred in front of name or pronouns. It's not your preferred pronouns or your preferred name, because preferred's like ice cream. I prefer chocolate chip cookie dough ice cream. I will eat chocolate if that's all you got, right? My pronouns, I don't prefer they, them. I use they, them. I don't have any others that I use. There's no other choices there. So it's not a preference. So again, if you're asking on a form or something for someone's pronouns, you can literally just write pronouns with a blank. Let them fill it in. Some final thoughts on language. Again, mirror the language that you use when talking to a person about their identity. And then you can always use the affirming exploration technique if they share something that maybe you don't know the identity term, or maybe the identity has multiple meanings. So you can say things like, oh, thanks for sharing that with me. A lot of people use the term bisexual in different ways. So when you say you identify as bisexual, can you tell me what that means for you? You're not othering. You're not saying, oh, that's weird, I don't know what that is. None of that. You're just saying, oh, thanks. Can you share a little bit more so I know how this impacts you? Speaking of supporting people, let's talk about coming out. So coming out is the process in which someone shares their identity, such as their sexual orientation or gender identity, with themselves or others. And it is a process. It is a lifelong process. A lot of people think of like those big moments of coming out, of like coming out to your parents, or you're coming out at work, or whatever the case may be. But coming out happens on a daily basis sometimes. And it's not just verbal coming out either. Sometimes it's an act of coming out. For example, if I started a new job and I put a picture of my same gendered spouse on the desk, that's an act of coming out. Because now anyone who stops by my desk and sees me and my spouse knows I'm LGBTQ, right? Um, holding hands with someone of the same gender out in public. That's an act of coming out. There are lots of ways, some big, some small. Most important thing, if someone comes out to you, treat that as a trusted moment. Thank them for sharing. Ask them how you can best support them. And then keep that information to yourself. We never out people because that can be dangerous. In some places, it's still legal to fire or not hire or not give housing to people because they're LGBTQ. So by outing them, you could be causing those things. For our young people, if they're not out to their parents, that can lead to rejection and people getting kicked out of their houses. So we never ever out anyone. Now, there is like one slight exception to this rule, and that is if someone comes out to you and says, "Hey, I'm trans, I want you to use this name and these pronouns for me." You can say, "Great, happy to do that. Thanks for sharing." But this should lead to a couple more questions because I want to be respectful. I want to use their new name and their new pronouns, right? Want to do that. But there's a chance that if I do that, I'm going to accidentally out them to someone else, right? So we want to ask them a few questions in that moment. Hey, I'm happy to support you and do that. Do you want me to use that name and those pronouns with your parents, with your classmates, with your teachers, right? Wherever we're seeing this person, we want to ask about that environment and say, do you want me to do that here? Do you want me to do that here? And then follow their lead. If they say, yeah, use it everywhere, great. That's what we're going to do. If they say, oh, you know what? I'm not out to my parents. So could you not, with my parents, could you use my old name and old pronouns with my parents? Okay, we do that. Because again, we're not going to out people against their will, but we also want to be respectful. So we might have to use two different names and two different sets of pronouns with them. It's okay. It's going to be work, but it's good allyship. I just wanted to take a little quick note on intersectionality. You know, we talked a lot about LGBTQ identities today, but we need to recognize that LGBTQ identities, like LGBTQ people, aren't a monolith. Like we're not all the same, and we also bring with us to the table uh, these overlapping interdependent systems of privilege and oppression based on our other social categorizations that we bring to the table: our race, our class, our gender, our ability, all those things, right? And why that's important is because we know that minority stress is real. So we see higher rates of mental health issues and suicidality amongst folks who are who occupy marginalized identities. This is particularly true for those who occupy multiple marginalized social positions, because then it's just stacking kind of the risk factor on top of one another. And so it's just really important that, again, we're looking kind of at the whole person. In that in order to determine risk factors such as discrimination, bullying, rejection, those types of things, or protective factors, social supports, role models, inclusive policies, all that kind of stuff. And that's going to help us figure out the mental health side and like, you know, what can we do to decrease those risk factors and increase those protective factors to support our young people. Um, I'm going to see if I got to the right one. Nope. Sorry, I'm just skipping ahead here. Just to be mindful of time. So, last little bit here. Just some active allyship tips, tricks, reminders, whatever you want to look at it as. So first, be kind, use empathy always. It is the best form of communication that we could use. Check your own biases. We all have biases. Even as a member of the LGBTQ community, I have my own biases about the community. And so have to check those and recognize those and prevent discrimination or microaggressions or any of those things from happening. Respect everyone. We don't need to understand them to respect them. use inclusive language, so mirror that language, be intentional about what you ask and say. I tell people all the time, like, I get paid to talk about my identity. And that means all the emotional labor that I put in talking about my identity is compensated. And I would say fairly compensated. Not everyone gets compensated to do the emotional labor of talking about their identities. And so when we're asking people about their identities, make sure that you're giving them space, that if they want to share, that you're an active, engaged listener, and that if they don't want to share, that they can say, you know, I don't really feel comfortable talking about that right now, and make it so that either answer that they give is acceptable. Facilitate inclusive pronoun practices. That means not only using people's correct pronouns correctly and consistently, but also share your pronouns. Use it on anywhere your name goes, your pronouns can follow. You know, you can introduce yourself with your pronouns. All those things are acts of allyship. Speak out when you see harassment, discrimination, biases, microaggressions, etc. Be an upstander, not a bystander. Gender inclusive facilities go a really long way. When trans and non-binary folks have access to gender inclusive facilities, it significantly increases their mental health and well-being, and decreases their stress and suicidality. So that means bathrooms, changing rooms, inpatient care spaces, all those, just being mindful. A single stall, gender neutral, accessible bathroom helps literally everyone. And I found out recently that the Oklahoma State Capitol building actually has 3 single stall gender neutral restrooms. And one of those restrooms has an adult changing table in it. And so, like, if the Oklahoma State Capitol, or sorry, not Oklahoma, North Dakota, sorry, North Dakota State Capitol, if the North Dakota State Capitol building can provide a gender inclusive facility, I think anywhere can, honestly. Like, dang. And accessible at that. Like, not only is it gender inclusive, but it's fully accessible, which is just amazing. Anyway, encourage and facilitate self-advocacy. Self-advocacy is a form of resiliency. So that means connecting LGBTQ folks to other LGBTQ folks, particularly role models and mentors, amplifying LGBTQ voices, promoting positive media representation. That can be anything from hitting like or retweet to sharing a book or movie that you watch that had LGBTQ folks in it. The more we see ourselves in media, the more normalized it becomes and the easier it becomes. Educate yourself, know what your local mental health resources and LGBTQ resources are before you need them, and keep learning about all those things. Again, educating yourself is an act of allyship as well. And then advocate for change, whether that's within your own company or organization, or whether that's with state and federal legislation. Anything you can do to increase inclusion of LGBTQ folks, the better. Where can you learn more? Check out thetrevorproject.org/research. That'll get you to our national survey, our monthly research briefs, and more. And then /resources will get you to our different guides, our coming out guide, our guide to being an ally to trans and non-binary youth. So basically a bunch of different guides for LGBTQ young people and their allies. All of these resources, by the way, on both research and resources, are available in PDF. So you can then share them digitally. You can print them off. You never need permission to share our resources. You are always welcome to link to those, to share them in any way. Just, you know, make sure you cite us if you're putting us on a slideshow somewhere. But these resources are meant to be out in the public. That's what they're there for. And then let me be a resource to you. That's my email there, keegan.miller@thetrevorproject.org. We bring this training all sorts of places. We also do individual trainings quarterly. So if there's an individual in your life who's like, oh, I wish I could go to this training, send them my direction. If you ever have questions or need resources, please don't hesitate to reach out. And then finally, I'm happy to take whatever questions you have, but I'd also really love your feedback on today's session. So if you would be so kind as to provide me a little feedback, either that QR code or that tiny URL, I would be delighted. It takes about 5 minutes to fill out. But with that, I'm happy to take any questions that anyone may have. And thank you all for being here today.
I have a question.
Mhm.
Um, when you are with like a trans person and somebody misgenders them, when is it appropriate for like me as an ally to correct that? Or do I give time and space for the trans person to correct their own pronouns? Or is it just have a private conversation with them and ask them their preference?
Yeah, so if you have the opportunity to ask the trans person how they would like you to help in the future, that's the best thing you can do is follow their lead on that. I can tell you as a trans person, like it gets exhausting correcting people. So much to the point like I don't correct people anymore. I just figure out they'll either figure it out or they won't. And that tells me a lot more about the person than it does pronouns. But anyway, um, so I always say follow that person's lead, like ask them, say, hey, do you want me to correct folks? How, and then the follow-up is how aggressively would you like me to correct folks? Um, because there's a difference to being like, someone says, oh, she said that we're meeting at 12, and you just reply like, he, right? Like that's a response that corrects them, but it's like, did I mishear you? Did you want to try that again? Right? It's like it's a nicer way of doing it versus saying, hey, remember so and so uses he, him pronouns. Or being even more forceful and being like, hey, it's really important we respect people's pronouns, and that person uses he, him pronouns. So there's different ways. And so I always, again, ask that trans person if you have the opportunity to do so. Sometimes we don't have the opportunity to ask that question, and it just comes up. In those instances, I suggest a quick correct, like the just response of the correct pronoun of like he, um, and then move on. But if it becomes a persistent issue, then I would pull that other person aside later and correct it with them. Um, Most of the time that we use pronouns is not when a person is in the room with us. The vast majority of the time that we use pronouns is when they're not here and I'm referring to them, right? So that's really good news because that means the vast majority of the time that we hear it wrong, we have the opportunity to correct it without the trans person being in the room. And that's the best time to fix it, is when I don't ever have to hear it. So
Right. Yeah. So do you have recommendations on like when someone's not there and you're correcting or giving them that feedback? I mean, of course, you don't want to be disclosing personal information about that person, um, or outing them. Um, so would you suggest just a simple, hey, they use he, him pronouns, or hey, they use they, them pronouns. So you would word it
yeah,
like this.
yeah, that's
The thing.
exactly what I would say is
Okay.
yeah, hey, that person uses whatever pronouns. Yeah, that's the easiest.
Okay. And then in the past, when I have done something similar to that and they start asking me personal questions, generally my response is, that's not my story to tell. And then I move the conversation along. Do you have any other
Yeah,
suggestions?
no, that's a great response. And I think, uh my response to any of that would be like, I just know what their pronouns are, and that's all I need to know to get it right. I don't need to know their identity or their story behind it or any of that. I just need to know that this is the pronouns they use. And so that's kind of, that's what I'm sharing here, and leave it there. But yeah, I love that. That's not my story to tell. Absolutely.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions?
All right, awesome. Thank you so much, Keegan. I learned new things today. I'm always looking for ways to be a better ally, so I appreciate these opportunities and I appreciate everyone who attended today. I know this can be a challenging topic for a lot of people. I appreciate you taking time to learn about it and work on being an active ally. It's very meaningful to me personally, and I know a lot of people who benefit from our actions to learn. So very, very much appreciated. Keegan, thank you so much again. I am so glad this was able to happen. Those of you who attended today, if you'd like a certificate of attendance or a CEU certificate, make sure you fill out that link. I will hang out for just a few more minutes here, so if you have any questions, feel free to ask. And other than that, have a great day, and we'll hope to see you next time. I'll get a flyer sent out about our next session within the next 24 hours or so.